Hello and welcome back to Hellbound Garage. If I look a little out of sorts today, look a little sweaty, look a little nasty, I just got done with a 25-mile bike ride. I'm finding as I get older that personal fitness is very much as important of a thing as my hobbies, working on cars, things of that nature. So if I look out of sorts, it's just because I'm a little tired from that. But behind me is my 1975 Datsun 280Z. That is normally the focus of what I'm working on, and this is where most of my time goes. But today we're actually going to be working on the true hero of Hellbound Garage, and that is the daily drivers. Now this is my 2003 Toyota Tundra, and this is my daily driver. In my search for a daily, I have had multiple different vehicles, and so far this one has fit the bill the best. My car that I had when I first moved back to the Midwest, first snowstorm, got stuck like 3 or 4 times, and I got tired of dealing with it. So I got a 4-wheel drive SUV, and that did good rather than it had a V6 in it, so the gas mileage as well as the power wasn't there. And I figured if I was going to get the gas mileage of a truck, then I wanted a V8 truck. In comes the Toyota Tundra. Now, I work from home, so this vehicle has actually not been driven that much. You could say that I'm lucky, especially with gas prices the way it is. It's like getting a pay raise from having to work from home because I'm not filling this every week. But because that doesn't get driven as much, I don't really call it the daily driver anymore, even though it is technically my daily. This, on the other hand, is my wife's 2014 Mazda 3. She bought this brand new after she graduated from nursing school and saved up enough money from her nursing job, and she's been driving this ever since. Reliability-wise, this thing is absolutely fantastic. I've been in charge of maintenance of it since I've been with her. I've only put in Mobil 1, 020 oil, gets tire rotations, filters, all that good jazz. It's had all the normal maintenance done on it because it is our nicest, most reliable vehicle. And at this point, it is the only vehicle that is considered the daily driver. It's not absolutely perfect for all conditions here in the Midwest, but that's why we have the truck if the car is not suited for the current environment. So she is planning a trip out of town and I'm going to be staying home. So we are going to be doing an oil change, an air filter, and a cabin filter, as well as a tire rotation on this to make sure that all the maintenance is up to snuff and nothing weird happens when she's on the road. But first things first, I'm going to get out of my clothes that I wore to bike because I do have a nice shirt on. So I'm going to go change into something a little less nice that I can get dirty, not have to worry about, and then we're going to start on the tire rotation. Now this is going to be one of those situations where it's a do as I say, not as I do kind of deals, because as you can see back there, I have 2 jacks that I'm going to be using to do the tire rotation. Normally jack stands are very much a thing. You always want to have that extra layer of safety when doing this type of thing. But unfortunately, all the jack stands that I own are underneath the Datsun because it has no suspension. Do as I say, not as I do. Always use jack stands. So for the tire rotation on this car, because I don't have a lift or jack stands, we're going to be taking and going from taking the front and putting it to the rear on each side. And then after we tighten down the lug nuts, we're going to raise the front of the car, and then we're going to swap the tires after that's done. This gives you your standard tire rotation. This is what most people are going to do. There are some places that say front to rear, depending on the type of tire that you have. If you have a 4-wheel drive vehicle, they'll say to put your spare in rotation if it's a matching spare. As times progress, manufacturers are doing less and less of that unless you have aftermarket wheels and tires. Let's get started. Hopefully you understand how I'm going to be doing the rotation on this, and hopefully you learn something. But always jack stands. And if you don't have jack stands, put a tire underneath the car. That way, if for whatever reason the jack gives, the tire catches the car and not your face.
wanna sleep in, cause I got something to prove. I gotta take what I hate and finally make a move. I think of you and all the shit you don't do. Well, I'ma make hella sure that I don't become you. I have no regrets, yeah, I'll tie up my chest. I'll never forget what it's like to be in debt. Been stabbed in the back bed, I'll show you what happens. Pass me the mic and I'll show you with action. I feel this pain, you already know. Turn that to gains, let my money show. I've got these things that I can't let go. Watch me turn this life into something that you can never own. I feel this pain, you already know. Turn that to gains, let my money show. I've got these things that I can't let go. Watch me turn this life into something that you can never own. So fight and die for the things you know you love. Do what you think is right and see life do what you want. So fight and die for the things you know you love. Do what you think is right and see life do what you want. So give me all the scars, I'm a human being. Cover them with tattoos so you can't see.
That takes care of the tire rotation. I hope you kind of understood what I was doing there, moving the fronts to the back and the backs to the front, and then snugging down the lug nuts on the front, not completely tightening them because they were going to come right back off, but making sure that the back ones were completely tight. Then after I got all of them switched, I made sure that the back ones were tight, came to the front, lifted up the front end of the vehicle, and then swapped the two front tires. It's just a standard rotation. Afterwards, I used my torque wrench, which you should have seen, and I will not tell you what the torque rating is on this because I don't want to be liable for that kind of information, so I'm not going to tell you socket sizes, torque ratings. Do your research, and you'll be able to find them then. It's not the kind of thing that I'm going to tell you. But anyways, one thing I will tell you is star pattern. Make sure you always tighten your lug nuts in a star pattern. You don't, then there's a chance of going off of the hub because some wheels are hub centric, and that could be a really bad thing. And I always finger tighten lug nuts, and then I hold the wheel against the hub to make sure that I don't have any of that issue. You'll learn after doing it a few times if you haven't already done it. Another thing, I don't know if you caught it, but when I switched sides, I didn't tighten down the jack on the front side. I didn't tighten the adjuster on it. So as I lifted the back of the car, the front sank down and it started to push the wheel off. That could have been a really bad situation. So that's why I don't like using just jacks. I like using jack stands because you never know what's going to happen. Even though I make sure that my jacks are well maintained, greased, full of oil, there is still the possibility of failures. Next thing on the list, just because I washed my hands when I went inside and got a drink, is we're going to do the cabin air filter. Ignore the mess that is the glove box. Most modern vehicles, or almost all modern vehicles now, have some sort of cabin air filter. And normally they are on the passenger side of the vehicle in front of the blower motor. Now they could be in a few different locations, and in this case they're behind the glove box. If you can see right there where that seal is at, that's where the cabin air filter is. And all I had to do for the glove box is just push the sides a little bit, and these little tabs give way so you can gain access to where the cabin air filter is. Each vehicle is going to be different. I've done Mini Coopers where they have this weird sliding deal where they're like a mile long and you have to slide them out and slide them back in. But in this case, it's nice and easy. Now, I'm not near as bad as most people when it comes to the cabin air filter. This is probably 15,000 miles worth of use. Normally, you're supposed to change them out every 10,000 miles of use or every 2 oil changes. Same thing as the air filter, but as you can see, there's a whole bunch of gunk in here. Now, what's going to accelerate the dirtiness and the just overall nastiness of these filters is going to be the environment that you're driving in. Say if you're in a desert climate and all that dust and everything, these are going to get dirtier way faster. You're definitely going to want to change them every 2 oil changes. In my case here, it's because of the trees, the fact that her family lives in the country, so we get a lot of cornfield dust and some gravel roads. And then the fact that we have 2 dogs. All that stuff gets circulated through the system, and if you don't have a filter, you're breathing that in. And at this point, this filter is almost kind of useless because this is what they're supposed to look like brand new. So definitely a good thing that I checked it. We're gonna get this in and we're gonna move to the next thing. Another thing is animals love that location to like hide nuts and make nests. Depending on if you are in the country, mice and squirrels find them as nice little hiding spots. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've pulled those out of previous customers' vehicles, and there's dead mice in them. There's a squirrel nest. I think my aunt just had a big problem with squirrels because she was feeding them and they nested in that area of her car. Definitely one of those things that you have to check. And the last benefit is you'll notice that your AC blows harder, it cools faster, or it heats faster, just because it's just like a home filter. If it gets clogged, you don't get that air circulation like you're supposed to. So definitely an essential part of normal car maintenance, even though you might not think it is. Next thing, we're going to be doing a underhood check, making sure that all the fluids are good. I don't necessarily have all the fluids for this if it does need them, so it'll at least give me a checklist of things that I know I need to go buy. We'll pull the air filter out of the air box and check that. I do have a new one, and I think that's due, and we'll just get ready to do the oil change on the car. So this is the air filter. As you can see, it is definitely needed. I do check this every oil change just because it's a habit, and this air box is nice and easy to gain access to. There are some vehicles that are really difficult, but you still want to check it at least every 10,000 miles. So this one, it's another one. It's about 15,000 miles. Partly because we're in city, they last a little longer. But we're gonna change it out for this nice shiny new one. So we checked the washer fluid, which is a little low. It's not bad, nothing that we can't deal with. The coolant is still good, which is good because at the beginning of winter I did have the routine maintenance of the radiator being flushed and the cooling system being flushed, so that's all brand new coolant from the dealership. You cannot check the transmission on these. It's a very weird system. You have to go to the dealership. That's also something else that I had maintenance at the dealer, so we're good there. Brake fluid is good. I do need to get that changed out. It is time to have that taken care of, but it'll be an item further down the line. The last couple of things I did was take off the oil cap and I put it in the hood hinge. Now there's a very specific reason for that. It's a habit that I picked up from working at dealerships and lube shops for so long. It ensures that you put that back on the valve cover or in the valve cover like it's supposed to be before you close the hood and give the vehicle back to the customer. Last thing you want to do is have quarts of oil spewing out the top of the motor because you forgot to put that cap back on there. The other thing is, in this vehicle it won't let you do it, but another habit you picked up is flagging, what they call flagging the oil filter or the oil dipstick. You pull it up and you let it sit there. That's another indicator saying, hey, you haven't put oil in me, make sure that I'm full, that kind of deal. You can also check the oil to see if it's low beforehand to find out if there might be any internal issues. I know because I drive this vehicle enough that there is none of those issues, so we're good there. And the battery, which is something else that if you were to take it to a lube shop they would check. I just had to replace that also this winter, so everything should be good for her trip. So I'll jack up the vehicle and we'll get the oil changed out and she'll be good to go. So it never fails. On this vehicle, just like every other modern vehicle, they've got these plastic plates all up underneath the car to help with aerodynamics, drag, cooling, whatever it may be. This vehicle has 1 and 2 access panels. Never fails. I always pull the wrong one. But underneath one of them for this car, which I'm pretty sure it's the back one, see, and I already started pulling it, will be the oil filter and the drain plug. And there they are. Now, like I said, I've been in charge of maintenance of this vehicle forever, but a little while ago, I had this drain plug changed because when I did the oil change, I used the same gasket and the same bolt or drain plug, and it finally started leaking after 100,000 miles. So I ended up having to go to a lube shop and have them change it out, which is why you'll see the paint marker here. This is a very common thing at all lube shops and dealerships to ensure that they are tight and that they're not tampered with by the next oil change. It's a liability thing. We'll get those pulled and we'll start draining the oil. Alright, couple of things with oil filters. Always just hand tighten these suckers. I only hand tighten these things, and the amount of times I still have to bust out my strap wrench to grab around it and break it loose is crazy. I think I have to do it just about every time, and I only hand tighten these. It's anybody that uses an impact on these really just hates people. That's all there is to it. The second thing, always make sure that your old gasket is on your oil filter. Last thing you want to do is go and put this new one on and have the old one still on there and double gasket it. Worst thing you can do is have somebody go down the road and the second gasket blow out and you have oil everywhere. I've had it done a couple of times, not by me personally, but by coworkers. It is a gnarly mess and people are really mad, or you're mad at yourself. And the last thing is always lube up your gaskets. Never put them on dry. That's another thing that'll make it super hard to get it off when you go to do the next change. I was always taught kind of like the KISS method, which you put the old filter on the new filter and you twist the 2 gaskets, and the oil on the old gasket then goes onto this and gives you just enough oil. Otherwise, you can use fresh oil, which is what a lot of places have you do, or you can use a bit of the old oil as long as it's clean on the gasket to make sure that it's lubed up properly. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add our oil. In my case, it is Mobil 1. In this particular vehicle, it is a 0W20 oil. And it is still on the jack, and that's because the panel's still on there. And I want to check start it, make sure that the oil filter is not going to leak or the drain plug's not going to leak after we fill it with oil. So I know a certain amount of oil that I can put in the car to do that process without having to completely verify that it is at the correct full level and get everything checked out. That way I can close up the bottom and then top off the oil up top. Depending on your vehicle, you may not even need to have a jack when you do this, like on a truck, but in this case, this is what I got to do. There are instances where I do not recommend leaving it on the jack or jack stand when you start the vehicle. It's really one of those things that you have to figure out yourself, because if you do it wrong, there is a chance that you may starve the engine of oil on startup and create a catastrophic failure. But in this case, I know this works, so this is what I'm going to do. And now we'll start it. And all you need to do is let the vehicle run long enough to build oil pressure. That way you can make sure that the filter is not leaking. Now, if this was a cartridge style filter, one that sits inside the motor with a housing instead of your normal can oil filter, then you have to rev it up to make sure that the seal on the cap is not leaking. But in this case, we got it nice and easy. And we checked underneath the vehicle, no leaks, no drips, no nothing. So I put the excess panel back on and dropped it back down to the ground. So now we can make sure that the oil in the motor is actually to the proper level before we go ahead and close the hood. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see that, but this is technically full. It's in between the two marks, so that means it's full. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to top it off a little bit more, just to the very top mark. Some people, this doesn't matter. For me, honestly, it doesn't matter, but I have a certain amount of oil left, and because I know from past experience that if I use the remaining oil that I have, it will come directly to that mark and not overfill it. So we'll go ahead and add that, and this oil change will be done. And the absolute last thing that we do on anything under the engine bay before we close the hood is we're going to check all the caps, make sure that they're all tight, make sure that dipsticks is secure. This is common practice at both dealerships, lube places. It's just a good sense of security knowing that everything is gone through. And like that, the oil change portion of this is done. All right, and like that, pretty much the maintenance is done on the car. There's a couple things left. One, to properly dispose of the oil, which you can go to most auto parts stores and they will gladly take the oil. Two, I'm going to check the tire pressure, but I'll do that off camera because that's super easy. And three, I'll go take it for a short ride, even though I'll probably be driving it before she leaves, just to verify that the wheels are torqued and they're on there correctly. Even though lug nuts are torqued, there is still a possibility that the wheel is off the hub and create a massive wobble. So just something super easy, peace of mind, just doing it around the block. You'll notice it real quick. All right, and if you've made it this far, if you watched this all the way through, thank you. But I'll give you a word of advice, especially if you are a younger car enthusiast. And it may be something that you were never told because of whatever family situation you may have, but it was something my dad drove into my brain at a very early age, right around the time I started driving. And that is, never turn your daily into a project. Never. Don't do it unless it's super simple bolt-ons. But even super simple bolt-ons can create a problem. You can order the wrong part, there can be a variance in things, and all of a sudden your daily driver is now broke in your driveway or in an apartment complex, wherever it may be, and you're stuck without reliable transportation. The Datsun, believe it or not, was supposed to be a daily driver, and that it's turned into a nightmare that is still haunting me to this day. Not haunting, but you know. The second piece of advice I will give you is, if you are with somebody, if you're in a relationship, whether it be guy, girl, whatever, make sure that you both have a daily driver. Then you can have your project car. The last thing you want to do is have one vehicle between the two of you. Trust me, I've learned from experience, not something you want to do. Creates a lot of stress and things start to happen, because as car people, we want to work on our project, and you may have had to go pick up somebody or whatever it may be, and it could create an argument. It could create a lot of stress, and your hobby could then be the source of a nightmare. So always make sure that you have a reliable daily driver for each person in your house, and then you can have a project car. That's about the only way it'll work. It's about the least stress you'll ever have. And the daily drivers don't have to be anything fancy. I mean, all our vehicles are paid off, and I mean, our life is pretty good. So just a word of advice coming from a guy that's learned it, and I've had a father to drill that experience into my head. Anytime I try to use a project as a daily, or turn my daily into a project, it never ends well and creates way more stress than what it's actually worth. And in the next video, we should be back on the Datsun. I have finished messing around with filler for inside the engine bay, and we will get to seam sealing, priming, and maybe even paint. Don't know, but we'll definitely be back on the Datsun.